公民总主笔。
Welcome to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. I'm your host, Ross Darrell Feingold. Our very special guest today, all the way from Italy, is Mark Antonio Savelli. Do you prefer Mark or Mark Antonio?
Whatever suits you. Also, Marca is also
Marca,
solution as
okay.
well.
It sounds more Italian. I call you Marca.
Perhaps.
I'm sorry I can't do one of those fake Italian accents like Americans sometimes do.
I can live with it.
Well, welcome to the show, Marca. Marca, you have a fascinating line of work in Taiwan, in Italy. You're an expert in art, you're an expert in wine, and you're an expert in olive oil, and you're sharing this knowledge with people here in Taiwan through teaching classes. So before we talk more in detail about some of your courses and your work, tell us a bit about yourself. Which part of Italy are you from?
I'm from a region called Emilia-Romagna. That is, I would say, in the center north. The largest city is Bologna. I've been living part of my life in Bologna, and some in Rimini, which is a small town near the sea, on the seaside.
It already sounds very wonderful, like a wonderful childhood.
Yeah, I cannot complain. Definitely.
Well, when you were growing up, what did you want to be? And don't tell us you wanted to be in the wine business, because, we know people start drinking wine at a young age in Italy and Europe, but what did you want to be when you were a child?
Yeah, so I'm son of art dealer and grandson of art dealer. So, but I would say that during my early years, they tend to suggest me not to pursue their same career for some reason. Perhaps too stressed by their own job, I don't know. And they say, never do my job, son, because really not worth the effort. At the same time, I recall perhaps wanted to be a writer. I remember a specific homework for my elementary school when they asked us what we would like to do as grown-up, and perhaps that was the answer. So,
Now, you mentioned your family, and you said your father was in the art business. Our image of Italians, one of those stereotypes is that family is really important. The big family meal and things like that. Is that your experience growing up as well?
I would say we are definitely, yes, there is this idea that perhaps the parents are in strong connection with the children. I would not say for what concerns the enlarged families or relatives a little more far, not necessarily my case, although it would not be that unusual, of course. No, I would say, though, that for what concerns my parents and I, definitely there is an approach more towards really following strictly the development of the young children.
Yeah, because we always see those TV shows. We always see those TV shows where Italian families are having big meals, and everybody's invited, and everyone looks so happy.
Yeah. No, I would say perhaps in my case not so a determining factor in my case. Yeah.
And one of the things in your biography, which I thought was really interesting, it says that you're descended from aristocracy, that you're the gu guizu hou yi, as we say in Mandarin. Tell us a little bit about this part of your family history.
I don't know if there's too much to say, and also normally I don't enjoy necessarily explaining too much about it. It is not that unusual. Occasionally in Italy there are families that have some centuries behind. And in most cases, and probably also in our cases, means perhaps inheriting some ancient palaces and a lot of debts. So most of the time you have manors and estates and not the money to maintain them. So that is more or less
happens
the
to royal families all over the world.
Yes, perhaps. So because, as you know, there obviously, and thankfully so, that there have been a transformation in the economy in the last centuries. And so a couple centuries ago, you were rich if you own a lot of land. Nowadays, if you own a lot of land, you have a lot of problems, and not much more than that.
This long after Italy's transformation into a republic, do people still have some warm feelings now? Do they, when they meet somebody such as with your background, are people, are they angry? They say, "Oh, it was terrible. We had a royal family, and now it's good we have a republic." Or do people still recognize the history and appreciate the history?
That is an interesting question. Probably is a complicated one to answer. I would say that there has been an aristocracy in Italy for a very long time, but the history of Italy connected to the monarchy is something else, something different, because Italy was not a unified country until 1860. And so the monarchy was from 1860 to World War II. And certainly I would say nobody now, or very few people, are nostalgic of having a monarchy, since monarchy created disasters more than anything else. But aristocracy is something else, and now doesn't mean anything, basically, except maybe a long history and a certain kind of education, perhaps, but nothing more.
Is it a good marketing thing for tourism or for even brands of, say,
I would say
wine
that
or
I
olive
don't really
oil?
mind showing off this kind of element. Perhaps Taiwanese people are curious about it, so I oblige and basically satisfy their curiosity. In Italy or in Europe, I would not particularly mind mentioning even this fact. So.
You obtained a PhD at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart, University Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. I'm trying to say it in Italian, which is in Milan.
Yes.
What do you remember about studying in Milan? Tell us something about that experience.
I've been studying Bologna first, and in Milan, then also in London. I have nothing to complain about my education. I'm a strong believer that education in humanities is still at level of excellence in Italy, in Europe, but I would say in Italy, in Germany especially. I study philosophy in Milan. And if I can connect this to something interesting for the audience here in Taiwan, I would say I perceive a lot of concern in many parents that are worried that their son would not have a successful career if chooses a path such as the one of humanities. But in my personal opinion, I would definitely suggest it to anybody, because at the end of the day, if you know something that very few people know, you will definitely find a way to make it into a career, transforming it into a way to have a good career. So I studied, for example, it's common in Italy, the people they are more hard works, the parents believe are more suitable for studying, they go to the Liceo Classico, which is basically a high school in which the main subjects are ancient Greek and Latin. And we believe that this will prepare you for anything. Many people study with me, then went to do engineering without issues, for example.
In such a time filled with uncertainty, not just COVID-19, there's always wars going on, unfortunately, in parts of the world. What's the contribution that you see? You talked about humanities education. What could philosophers specifically do, and help the rest of us understand the world's problems?
If there was an easy answer, I would not be here.
But that's why you study philosophy, right? You're supposed to give the rest of us the philosophical answer.
That's true. But I would say that probably is past the time where philosophy, unfortunately not completely past, where philosophy was convinced that creating a system could solve the issues of humanity. Communism is a philosophy in a way. And so I would say that most people that study philosophy nowadays don't have such great ambitions. They try to perhaps change themselves. Changing the world is a step that is a little bit too big and too dangerous right now for philosophy. So we start by changing ourselves, and then we'll see what else.
And what about even though for the corporate world, where they struggle with decisions like should we be investing or buying from certain parts of the world? That's very controversial now, with accusations about forced labor in China, for example. Do corporations need an in-house philosopher to help them guide them on these issues?
I believe that probably asking philosophy to create an ethics is also already a very complicated task to ask to philosophy, because nowadays we are in an age of crisis, uncertainties, where the strong and solid beliefs of centuries ago are getting challenged. And I think we are back to square zero, and we need to rebuild the architecture of what we really believe in. First of all, the principles. For example, in Milan we studied the title of my degree, funnily enough, was metaphysics, right? So what is the principle of the universe? What are the what is being? No, this is the first question of philosophy. So we really need to start from the beginning. And so we are very far from getting back to an age where philosophy is strong and there is a widespread agreement on it, on certain position of philosophy, so much that philosophy is able to influence practical decisions.
Yeah, the fact that you wrote a thesis with the title like Metaphysics already shows how difficult it must have been.
Difficult perhaps, and at the same time abstract and very, very far from any practical application. But I believe the practical application is making the individual that goes through philosophy a more self-aware individual that is understanding his own limits, his own personalities. No? So, one of the initiators of Western philosophy, Socrates, his motto was know yourself. So know yourself is one of the main challenges for the human being and for philosophy consequently.
You mentioned returning to older thought and things, and people may have lost touch, but some of your work is with art, and you work with older artwork, not modern artwork. Tell us how you developed expertise in art.
Once again, being son of an art dealer obviously made a big difference. Working on master paintings is very different from working on the modern by many points of view. The first one of them is the issue with your master is understanding the object, assessing the object. Whereas in contemporary art, most of the time, you don't even have that problem because maybe the artist is alive or you have just a certificate, a piece of paper that objectively decide this is Picasso, this is not Picasso. Doesn't matter how good you are at understanding the art of Picasso sometimes. You can sell Picasso without knowing anything of art history but being a good businessman, for example. In the case of old master, this is different. Most of the time we have objects that are mute to us, so we need to have just examine the object itself and try to get all the information we can just by analyzing the object, and this requires a lot of study, a lot of understanding, a lot of practice as well. And at the same time, so this is not 1000% objective, so sometimes you can have doubts. There is an object that is 80% Raphael and 20% we are not sure. Maybe the scientific community is disagreeing on some object. So this creates a lot of complications.
For those of us who are not so familiar with the old master works, help us understand who is the relevant people. So you mentioned maybe assessing whether or not it truly is an authentic piece, and there might be a scientific aspect, but then there's also people in the industry whose role might just be to assess the beauty of the object or the value. Tell us who's relevant. Who are the different types of jobs or people that might be involved?
Good question. Well, when I refer to scientific observation, I seldom would mean just using a machine to understand something for certain, because this actually is a bit of a myth, I would say, perhaps used to make the audience to calm down the uncertainty or the concerns of the clients. Like there is a machine that will tell us the truth. This unfortunately is seldom the case, because most of the time we are trying to distinguish an object from a copy. A copy is not a fake, it's not something made nowadays with the purpose of tricking the client. It's something made by the pupil of the master in the same workshop of the master with the same material, in the same age, with the same canvas. So we analyze scientifically and we just see that this is exactly the same material of the one from the master. So there is another science that is not the science of mathematics, is a science of based on humanities, based on the human eye. We try to look at the object and understand what these people are doing, and understand how good they are doing in that particular case, in each particular case. And so these are the people that matter, people that after years of study gain a reputation in their field and became let's say, the world expert on a particular painter. Because also this is important. It's not that you are an expert of a old master and so your word, your opinion is very important for every single painter. Most of the time, the opinion of a certain art historian matters for a couple painters, in which they were so well prepared that they demonstrated that their expertise is really up to the task. So these are the people that normally decide or contribute to decide also economically the destiny of the artworks.
And who are some of the other people involved in the industry, though, or who play an important role? For example, gallery owners, museum curators. I mean, who are the thought leaders in the old master world nowadays?
I would say everybody plays his own role. Probably the subject that kept increasingly being powerful is the auction houses, in the sense that, there are thousands of auction houses, but the largest of them were able to somehow apply to this art world mechanisms that are contemporary, that are up to the most recent advancement in terms of marketing, in terms of image, in terms of power to attract interest and to modify the opinion of people. Most of the art galleries in the old master worlds are small companies with maybe 2 employees, 5 employees. We don't have the giant gallery with 100 employees with more branches like would happen in contemporary art. This is rare because most of the time the problem is that you, even if your machine is very good, you don't have the fuel to fuel the machine. Because the important artworks are rare, no matter how good you are finding them. So if I have a Bill Gates come to me and say, I want a Raphael, I cannot give Raphael because there is no Raphael, not because I'm not good at finding it, just because there is not the material to make my business become larger.
And for that reason, that's such a great example. Did you ever think of changing your focus to more recent, Picasso is not yesterday's work, but it's still more recent, or contemporary modern art, because Bill Gates might come to you and you could call the artist and say, Bill wants to meet you because he might be interested in buying one of your pieces. Did you ever think of switching your focus?
I never did, because these worlds are too different from each other, and what I'm good at is not that. There are businessmen better than me that they can do a job like that way better than what I would ever be able to. So what is my expertise is all related to the fact that I developed an eye and a practice by looking at 1 million old master paintings. And I cannot transfer this skill to another field, unfortunately.
Now, I'm going to ask you probably the toughest question of this program. Who has the better parties? You know, when there's a gallery or a museum event, is it the modern art world has the better parties, or the old master works have the better parties?
The modern and contemporaries. People believe that the old master are crazy expensive. Most of the time, at least what is on the market, tends to be way cheaper than modern contemporary pieces. If you see the top auction of so the most expensive piece of contemporary art at the auctions is normally worth all the pieces of the auction of the old masters that is going to take place the day after. And it's perhaps also because the masterpieces of the old master are 99% already in museums and are not going to move, they are going not to be on the market, but also for other reasons. Availability, once again. You have way more pieces of contemporary and modern. And also you are able to find the masterpieces. And also the market tend to be more interested in that for many reasons. Objectivity, what we said before, you can have a piece of paper and say this is Picasso and nobody is going to doubt. Whereas in old master you always have the fear, the latent fear that what you bought for being this actually later on is going to not be what you wanted. And also I would say because you require a little bit more culture, to understand the old master, you need to have a little bit of an effort at the beginning to get yourself into a world that is more far. Whereas it's more easy, I would say, to understand art that is more close to our time, to our sensitivity, requires a little less effort initially. And so there are more clients for modern contemporary, absolutely.
You mentioned the museums. Tell us, for your area of interest and expertise, what are some of the best museums for you? Not the museums that everybody knows is famous, but the ones you really like to go to, just to enjoy the old masterworks.
I would say there are, Italy is the country with the largest concentration of art and museums for many historical reasons. These museums, there are thousands, 3,000 museums more or less in Italy. They have a very unbalanced degree of attention. 99% of the people go to Uffizi, go to Vatican Museum, to the large institutions, and then an incredibly low number of people dedicate the attention they would deserve to other museums that perhaps are not that far in distance in terms of importance of the artwork compared to the large institutions. Maybe they are smaller, they have less objects, but many of these museums have masterpieces that would be super important in any museum in the world. It would be the center room of the Louvre or the National Gallery. Maybe there are 2 or 3 of these masterpieces in each of the 1,000 small museums of Italy. And so these are the museums that I would enjoy visiting, and also I would suggest people to visit as well. Yeah.
And how much time would someone need? If somebody said, Marco, help me arrange an itinerary in Italy. I want to go see some of those small museums. I don't want to go to the Vatican Museum. How much time would someone need really to have an enjoyable, productive trip without spending months in Italy?
As much time as possible. I think you will never run out of things to see. We wrote a book, me and my wife Chawa, talking about this, the small cities, give an example of 10 small cities to make people understand how important they are, even if are out of the traditional routes of the tourism. So yeah, that is a suggestion. Spend as much time as you have, as much money as you can afford, and focus on these kind of cities that, again, the modern world tend to synthesize. So Italy must be these 4 or 5 places. Everybody goes there. God knows understanding what they are watching, unfortunately. Try to, if you go to the smaller city, you will not have the crowd of tourists around you, and you will have the same experience, maybe on a smaller scale, but the same quality of object, the same relevance for the culture, for the history of the Western world.
Does that apply not only in Italy, but in some of the other countries we associate with the old masters as well in Western Europe, that there are a lot of these small museums that people really should try to see?
Definitely, I would say that the phenomenon in Italy is amplified extremely, because the history of Italy is different, for example, from the one of France, let's say. That was a monarchy since the Middle Ages, and more or less have been a unified country since the Middle Ages. So 90% or 95%, the vast majority of the artist and also of the wealth necessary to maintain the artist was in the capital city, in the big centers. Italy has a completely different history. It was a bunch of little city-states, completely separated from each other, extremely diversified, continuously at war with each other, and continually competing to create the best art. And so this is why at the end of the day, all these museums in the small towns were able to keep masterpieces, which otherwise would not have been as easy.
Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about Marco Savelli's career in Taiwan and his work teaching, and also wine and olive oil, not just the masterworks. You're listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. To Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Our guest today is Marco Savelli, expert on master paintings, the old masterworks, and also Italian wines and Italian olive oil. Marco, why Taiwan? Why is Taiwan a place in need of someone of your knowledge?
I don't know if Taiwan is in need of my knowledge, but the reason I'm here is definitely because I married a Taiwanese. So we met in London, and later on, inevitably, I ended up spending a lot of time here in Taiwan, and even more now with the virus.
But is there a lot of demand for lectures and this knowledge sharing? You've written books about this topic.
I would say yes. I didn't necessarily went up searching for it, but it seems that people are demanding for this kind of expertise that I would say is rare in this country, because Western art, ancient Western art, is a field on its own and an unusual one normally here.
What are some of the lectures that you have upcoming here in Taiwan?
Yeah, I've been running courses in Furan University, open to anybody, so it's possible to sign up even now, not necessarily if you are a student in that university. And we have been talking about a few topics more or less connected with this. So medieval history as well, iconography, so look at a painting, what the painting wants to represent, and what are the tools that the painting used to express and to deliver informations. And then the art business, so more or less how to connect art with the world of the people that buys and sell it as a job.
Who is the person who typically attends your courses? Have you noticed any trends? For example, are they people who've already traveled in Europe and Italy, or if they've never traveled in Europe and Italy? Are they people who already have some exposure to the art world, or they don't have any exposure to the art world? Who's the typical attendee?
I would say people that are interested in the lifestyle that goes around art and beauty, perhaps are interested in Italy as a world, as an idea, as perhaps a destination for vacation for most of them. Not necessarily people that are already in the business, not at all. This is way more an exception. And not necessarily people that have a large expertise in the topics. Perhaps people that want to start their journey into these subjects, and I try to take this into account and make myself understood by everybody.
What about people who are already a bit on the way into the journey? Because Taiwan does have some art collectors, including people who collect Western art, not only Chinese art. Are they also receptive to this, or do people say, "Well, no, I've already been to the museums. I don't need this," and then you wind up getting people with who are new to the field attending the classes? So, is it also for people who have some exposure?
Definitely. I would say again, the world of contemporary and modern sometimes tend to be a separated one, more than what it should, perhaps. But yes, if there is a positive data on talking about trends for what concern ancient art, is the one of the attendance to museums. Like in Italy, basically, before the virus obviously, was 10% more visitor basically every year in the last 10 or 15 years. And most of these people come from Asia, come from China. It's people that perhaps didn't have the chance to travel before and now have the economical resources necessary to do so. And some of them are not satisfied just by visiting the museum, but they would like to know more and perhaps to even collect.
And for the collectors in Taiwan at really the high end of the market, do you find that this is the type of artwork that they're genuinely interested in adding to their collections? The people who really can afford the more expensive pieces, or are they still more focused on the modern art?
Yeah, for what concerns Asia, in my personal experience, and one of my family, I've been working more with museums or with institutions, private or public as well. It's perhaps a step that not all the collectors are ready yet to do, the one towards all masters, although the interest is increasing objectively. But once again, maybe the first step is a cultural one. It's necessary to get yourself into the shoes of the people who lived centuries ago, that different values and care about different things. But once that is achieved, I would say then the way is downwards, right? So I think we are at the beginning of the phenomenon. So I detect positive signals, but I still believe there is a lot of room for improvement.
What's one of the challenges that you encounter when lecturing about this topic? It's not the same as being able to take the students to the museum, and you're working with photos or videos. Yes. What's the challenge in the classroom when talking about the old masterworks?
I need to tell things that the people can understand, because for any expert of any field, the risk is that you forget what things that for you are obvious, but they are not necessarily obvious for somebody else. So you need to make sure that the people are not missing any passage, any step. And also you want to connect what you are saying to somebody that is close to their experience, to their sensitivity, to what gives them also perhaps an emotion, because art is connected to emotion as well. So we are not just making science, we are trying to talk about beautiful things, and these beautiful things are powerful. So it's my job to make this power get through.
Speaking of beautiful things and not being able to see the beautiful things, and you mentioned the virus a few minutes ago, what has COVID-19 meant for the art world and specifically for the old masterworks? I mean, obviously we can't visit museums, it's very difficult to travel. What's really the practical impact on the art world?
I would say most of it is on hold, is on stasis, myself perhaps, because again I'm not doing what I would normally do, traveling way more and trying to sell paintings. Well, after all, this is the positive side of this kind of field. Artwork does not get old, does not have a due date. So after all, you can just leave everything there and wait for the storm to end.
Are you seeing the same trend that other types of collectibles have seen, though, or not just in the art world, but other types of collectibles, memorabilia as well? There's been a lot of price increases. I guess people are sitting home, they're unhappy, they start buying stuff, and it's easy to join an auction by video conference, and you start bidding more and more. Has that also happened in your part of the art world?
It's very hard to answer the statistic about general trends, because as I also need to say during my lessons, this is a kind of field where statistics don't really help, because we are talking more about a series of unique events, because all the artwork are unique. Sometimes that year, for coincidences, more important objects emerge, and so the graphics say our market is great. Then the year after, the results are very, very different, but it's not that the market has changed. It's sometimes just opportunities.
For example, if a family decides to release a piece that they had in their collection for sale.
Exactly, or simply some piece that was misunderstood emerges just by chance.
You decide it wasn't the pupil, it was actually the master.
Exactly. It happens every week, and so you can never foresee in advance.
Well, what about after normal activity, travel resumes, hopefully soon? Which areas of the art world generally, or within the space of the old masterworks, are going to be really hot or popular? Are people going to be rushing to the Vatican Museum or certain museums, for example? Or is there going to be a rush to purchase certain types of old masterworks? Do you have a feel for what's upcoming?
It's hard to tell. I would say that what was popular before should get back to the level of before. There have been attempts to, once again, try to transform a world that was basically the same as it had been 100 years before, try to bring this kind of world to new generations. This is one of the challenges. And perhaps, for example, the digitalization that was a consequence of COVID might bring something new, something positive to this world. So the attempt to reach an audience that perhaps cannot be reached with traditional mediums, but is more receptive to, let's say, social networks or other means of communication. This is just an example. Hard to foresee the future, but this is my guess.
You mentioned, people trying to find their emotions and things like that. And one way we do that is not only with art, but with food as well. So let's talk a bit about your experience with the food and the wine world, the olive oil world as well. When we go to the supermarket or the wine store here in Taiwan nowadays, especially here in Taipei, big selection. Right? There's a big selection of wines, red wines, white wines, from Italy, from France. Olive oil selection is, takes up many shelves in the supermarket. Even at the lower price supermarket, online shopping, the same thing as well. Lots of selection. What's something that those of us here in Taiwan don't know, don't understand, something we should appreciate more about Italian wine and Italian olive oil?
Let's see where to start. As you know, I've been traveling through Taiwan and explaining wine, explaining oil, making people try different products, not necessarily only my products. And so many are the things that I would consider important. One that I would pick, for example, is what is extra virgin olive oil, what is pure olive oil. I invite people to Google it and to figure out, because perhaps it's hard to explain, but there is a big difference. And this kind of definition are definition that the Italian law originally and the European or later proposed, that are a bit misleading as long as you don't really go to check what this means. So these products are very different. Pure olive oil basically is a recycled product of oil that have issues, so to put it very short. But so being aware of the definition is the first step. So what am I buying? So really this matters a lot. For what concern wine, for example, I would say there are a few misconceptions in Taiwan that I consider common, because they are coming from the world of whiskey. So whiskey is very popular in Taiwan, and but many things that are true for whiskey are not true for wine and should not be applied to wine. For example, basically a whiskey that is just made tastes of nearly nothing. So the wood is 90% of what makes the difference in whiskey. Whereas for wine, if applying this concept would be incorrect. Most of the time, there is the risk to run into wines that have too much wood, and basically the wood covers the flavor of the grapes and the territory that should be the main one. So working with cereals that are very replaceable and are not really the point of what makes the whiskey good. Whiskey is the result of craftsmanship. In the case of wine, wine is the result of nature for the most part, and so we need to be aware of this. Sometimes in Taiwan it happened to me to find wines that they start from a poor raw material and then they are completely covered by wood in order to achieve some more complexity. So this is the first suggestion. Try to understand that wine is about grapes and territory way more than what human beings can do to try to improve it.
When people are buying wine just to accompany dinner at home, for example, they're not making a fancy party or something like that. If they're buying Italian wine at the supermarket, for example, and they don't want to spend a lot of money, what should they be looking for? What type of wine, what year, for example, but within a reasonable price range?
Yes, I would say not focus too much on very old wines. Also, this is, I believe in part a misconception that the wine, to be a good wine, need to be very old. This is not the case at all. Normally, all wines are just different. They tend to be more expensive because they are more expensive to produce, but not because they are necessarily better. And it's not that a wine that is young is necessarily a low quality wine, not at all. I would say in Italy, nearly everybody drinks every day wines that are not more than a couple years old, and not for economical reasons, just because they prefer it. So I would say try to don't get too much fooled by the marketing of wine that try to sell you the most expensive bottle. And so they say you need to be old because the older bottle is the one that in theory would be hardest to sell because it's more expensive to produce. So this is a point. And Italy, speaking of Italian wine in particular, I would say we are not as good as advertising ourselves compared to other countries. I think the quality of Italian wines, you got to believe me, is not inferior to the one of France. And so we are the top in the world together with France. This is my objective assessment. Obviously, I'm Italian, so
yeah, very objective.
You're free to take this suggestion with grain of salt, obviously. And there is an enormous variety. In this, is very hard to beat Italy because we do wine from the top to the islands, and in every different city or region, there is a different territory, different chemical composition, different weather, and so the enormous variety of wines that you can experience, I think, is unbeatable. At least that. Yeah, so there is something for every taste.
Yeah. So give us some suggestions if people are going to the supermarket now in 2021. They see some things on the shelf, or they go to the wine store. What are some suggestions? You don't have to mention specific vineyards, but some years or types of wines that you suggest now is a good time to buy them.
Yes. For example, the Sangiovese grapes can express itself in many different ways. It's the base for many of the most prestigious Italian wines. For example, in my region, we do pure Sangiovese, so 100%. So what I produce, Boscobello Sangiovese, is just that. But if you go, for example, to Chianti, very well-known wine made in Tuscany, is a wine that is 90% Sangiovese plus 10% of other kind of grapes. So but at the same time, you move the same grapes to a different region, the result tend to be very, very different. So, what to say? I would say try the variety that are in purity to try to gradually be able to detect the different varieties and to understand their typical character, the typical flavor. Also, for example, speaking outside of my production area, for example, the Marche region, it is in the middle between Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna, I would say, produces extraordinary wine, in my opinion, that are not as well known and perhaps have a good relationship price quality here in Taiwan as well. So, for example, Lacrima di Moro d'Alba, a wine that I found available in Taiwan, that I believe to be very good and unique, very, very clearly detectable and has his own distinctive flavors. For example, Rosso Piceno, Rosso Conero, other wines of the same area that I would strongly recommend.
And for Taiwan consumers of food as well as wine, in your experience, Italian wine goes best with what kind of foods in Taiwan?
Mixing wine and food is very important. I believe drinking wine out of the meal doesn't make too much sense to me personally. I would say that a good wine with the right match can really do its best, make the food taste better. So, but this after all is very much related to taste. We have a lot of theories about it, and many people disagree on the topic. So there are many rules that can be broken. So normally we have the idea that sweet goes with sweet. Besides that, so a dessert needs to have a sweet wine, right? And you would not have a sweet wine with a salty meal, with a salty dish. Besides that, is really up, I believe, to the personal inclinations. I would not have strict rules.
And on the olive oil, it's so hard for us to understand. You were explaining the definitions, and is there something that's too good to be true? If you go to the supermarket and you see a bottle of wine for 200 Taiwan dollars, $7 or $8 US, a 1 liter, bottle of olive oil, is that too good to be true?
I'm afraid so, because there are many situations, especially with olive oil, where you are called to choose between quality and price. For example, I can have, in my field there are 300 trees in a hectare. Industrial production have 1,000 trees in a hectare. So already their oil costs 1/3 to them. But at what price? At what cost for the quality, I mean? The trees are not born to stay so close to each other. So you need to have a lot of composting, a lot of artificial watering. Already you are removing nutrition from the ground. They are competing, the trees, for the same nutrition. And so at the end of the day, you are an oil that tastes of nothing. Or for example, let's say mechanized harvesting. If you have very large plantation, you pick up with a machine, sometimes the olives stay amassed in mountains and they ferment, and we have the phenomenon of warming. The olive become warm, and then when you mill them to make oil, you have a product that has a big defect called warming, that is basically to be found in 9 out of 10 bottles that you find in supermarket in Taiwan. So 9 out of 10 bottles in Taiwan are oil that in theory should not be allowed to be sold for extra virgin, because extra virgin should have no defects. These kind of defects are unfortunately very frequent in case of industrial production that make the product cheaper, yes, but at the cost of basically ruining completely the final result. And obviously with it goes away all the supposed benefits for the health.
Well, what about the competition? Again, you go to the supermarket now and it's not just olive oil on the shelf. There's avocado oil and rapeseed oil and these additional products that we didn't see years ago. Then some of them are flavored, right? There's chili flavor and all these other things. What's the view from the expert on this trend?
First of all, you say something very interesting. We didn't see them years ago. The reason is that you need chemistry, high temperatures, etc. to extract these kind of oils. Olive oil exists since the dawn of civilization, because basically you take a rock, you smash some olives, you will obtain some oil. So this is why. So you are not you are not diminishing the integrity of what you are working with. Because if you raise the temperature to obtain the oil from material that normally are not made for that, you're already cooking what you are going to extract. So you're already taking away a lot of the nutrition and a lot of the healthy components. So this is an example. And also, once again, this is an oil from a fruit. Most of the other oil are from seeds. So then later you look at the chemistry and you see the composition of olive oil is completely different, the chemical composition, from the one of other oils. And the kind of lipids that constitute olive oil are completely different. They are the one that organism need the most, that is not able to produce by itself, and they don't cause the typical diseases that go together with animal fat, with butter, and so on. Is not just a case. It's because for some reason nature wanted this ingredient to be basically more connected with how the human body works.
So go with the nature. Don't buy the fancy, or I shouldn't say fancy, but the ones with the more interesting or peculiar background, right?
This is what I would suggest. Obviously, the story is long, but I always encourage the people to go to have a look at themselves, just look at Wikipedia, just go deep in these kind of things, because I'm strongly convinced that I have a product of excellence. So more knowledge is good for me. It's good for my marketing. My marketing is based on showing people PowerPoints with Wikipedia information.
Marco, we're almost out of time. So very quickly, tell us, where can people find out more information about you, your wine, your olive oil, your courses on the Old Masterworks paintings?
Well, thank you very much for asking. Furan University, the website, there are all the information for the courses. And Boscobello, Boscobello, for wine and oil and balsamic vinegar, anything.
Yeah, just Google Boscobello.
Yes, definitely. .tw.
Terrific. Well, our guest today has been Marco Savelli, expert on the Old Masterworks, Italian wine, and Italian olive oil. Thank you for coming to the show, Marco.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Have a great weekend.